Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by George Yeo, former Minister for Foreign Affairs in Singapore, someone who knows China very well and has written regularly about the country's politics and economics. It's wonderful to have you on the program, Mr. Yeo. In the first instance, I'd like to get your thoughts on what Jiang Zemin's greatest achievements were.
Well, he was the leader of China at a remarkable period of economic growth. He was able to do this by maintaining great strategic discipline in keeping China open and maintaining stable relations with the US. So despite the series of incidents, the Taiwan Strait missile crisis, the Hainan spy plane incident, and the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999, he kept relations on an even keel. And after September 11, China became an ally of the US in the war on terrorism. So this is often forgotten, but without that strategic stability, China could not have enjoyed those years of helter-skelter double-digit growth.
You know, it's interesting, Mr. Yeo, you talk about the fact that period was defined by openness, looking to where China is today, relatively isolated in terms of how it compares to that period under Jiang Zemin. How damaging do you think this isolation is for China at the moment?
Well, COVID has colored our views of world developments, and especially of China. China was unsettled by the Omicron variant, but before that, China was in fact the least damaged economy during COVID and did most of the manufacturing for the world. But this period will pass because all epidemics come to an end, and Xi Jinping is asserting a very strong leadership, not only in China, but to some extent in the much wider region. I think China is entering a different phase, and some of the excesses of the previous period of rapid growth are now being decisively addressed.
Mr. Yeo, you talk about the different phase for China and what it's entering. We've also seen some of the most significant protests in China against that coronavirus policy since arguably Tiananmen in 1989. How much pressure is this putting the Chinese Communist Party under?
We must put it in proportion. The first agenda item at the first meeting of the new standing committee was to discuss the relaxation of COVID measures. And China is a big country. They have to be very careful in turning the big knob, because if you turn it half a degree, the travels on the ground may be in kilometers. So they are fine-tuning all the time. And recently, they had a marathon in Shanghai, no masks, of course, but they had to maintain a wider cordon around Shanghai in order to manage risk. And they're doing this all over China now. But people are frustrated. They don't really know what's happening. In many places, there's overreaction. But the general direction of opening up post-COVID, I think, is very clear.
And do you see that opening up taking place in the next year or 18 months or so?
I would say they will do it step by step. It'd be jerky, but in a year's time, it'd be a very different China. And in 2 years' time, COVID would have been something of the past.
George Yeo, former Minister for Foreign Affairs in Singapore, thank you so much for joining us with your thoughts on Newsday.